My daughter's baptism was supposed to be the most sacred day of our lives. A moment of pure joy, surrounded by family, celebrating her entrance into our faith community. Instead, it became the day I discovered my husband had been living a double life. And the proof? She was standing right there in the baptismal pool, 6 months pregnant with his child, holding my 3-month-old baby girl in her arms. Some betrayals are whispered in dark corners. Mine was announced in holy water, in front of everyone I loved. This is that story. Let me take you back to that Sunday morning in late September. I woke up before my alarm, my heart already racing with excitement. Today was Emma's baptism day. My daughter was only 3 months old, this tiny, perfect human who had completely transformed my world. And today, our church family would welcome her officially into the faith. For me, baptism wasn't just some ceremony to check off a list. It was everything, a sacred covenant, a promise from our entire community to help raise this child in love and faith. I'd been planning every detail for weeks. The white baptismal gown with hand-embroidered roses, the small reception afterward with Emma's favorite lavender cupcakes, even though she couldn't eat them yet. The photographer I'd hired to capture every moment. My mother had flown in from Phoenix the night before. My sister Sarah drove up from San Diego with her 3 kids. Even my husband Daniel's parents made the trip from Reno, despite his mother's recent hip surgery. Everyone we loved was gathering to celebrate our daughter. I remember standing in the nursery that morning, sunlight streaming through the window, holding Emma in my arms as I dressed her in that perfect white gown. She looked like an absolute angel, those big blue eyes staring up at me, wispy blonde curls, chubby cheeks, tiny fingers wrapped around mine. "Today's your special day, sweet girl," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "Today you become part of something so much bigger than all of us." Daniel appeared in the doorway, already dressed in his navy suit, the one I'd bought him for our anniversary last year. "My 2 beautiful girls," he said, smiling. He walked over and kissed my cheek, then gently stroked Emma's head. At that moment, standing there together, I felt completely blessed. We had everything. A beautiful home, a healthy daughter, a strong marriage of 6 years. I had no idea that in less than 3 hours, my entire world would shatter. We arrived at Riverside Community Church at 9:30, half an hour before the service started. The building was beautiful that morning, autumn sunlight filtering through the stained glass windows, casting colored patterns across the wooden pews. Our church had about 300 members, and it felt like most of them had shown up for Emma's big day. The sanctuary was already filling up. My mother immediately took Emma from my arms, showing her off to anyone who would look. "Look at this angel, my first grandbaby. Can you believe how perfect she is?" I was surrounded by hugs, congratulations, people wanting to touch Emma's little hands. My sister Sarah pulled me aside. "You okay? You seem nervous." "Just want everything to be perfect," I said, smoothing down my dress for the 10th time. "It will be. Emma's going to be baptized, surrounded by people who love her. That's all that matters." She was right. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. Daniel was across the room talking to Pastor Mike, our senior pastor who would be performing the baptism. They were laughing about something, totally relaxed. I wished I could feel that calm. At 9:50, Pastor Mike's wife Lauren approached me with a warm smile. "Rebecca, sweetheart, I wanted to let you know we have a wonderful volunteer helping with the baptism today. She's going to assist by holding Emma in the pool while Pastor Mike performs the blessing." I nodded. That was normal. Our church always had volunteers help during baptisms, especially with infants, to make sure everything went smoothly. "Her name is Melissa," Lauren continued. "She's been attending our women's Bible study for about 6 months now. Absolutely lovely person. You're going to adore her. 6 months." I didn't think anything of it then. "Why would I? That sounds perfect," I said. "Thank you so much for organizing everything." "Of course, dear. This is such a special day. Now the service starts in 10 minutes. You and Daniel will sit in the front row with Emma, and when it's time, Pastor Mike will call you forward." Everything was going according to plan. The service started right at 10 o'clock. We sang 3 worship songs, the whole congregation on their feet, voices rising together. I held Emma against my chest, swaying gently to the music. Daniel stood next to me, his hand on the small of my back. To anyone watching, we looked like the perfect young family. Then Pastor Mike stepped up to the microphone. Before we continue with today's message, we have something very special. The Miller family is here today to dedicate their daughter Emma to the Lord through baptism. Applause rippled through the sanctuary. Rebecca, Daniel, would you please come forward with Emma? My heart was pounding as we walked down the aisle toward the front of the church. I could feel 300 pairs of eyes on us, all smiling, all celebrating. We reached the baptismal pool, which was built into the floor at the front of the sanctuary, filled with water that caught the morning light. And that's when I saw her for the first time. A woman I'd never seen before was standing next to the pool, wearing a simple blue dress. She was pretty, late 20s, maybe 30. Long, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, warm brown eyes, a kind, gentle face. And she was visibly, unmistakably pregnant. Not early pregnancy, not a little bump you might miss. She had to be at least 6 months along, maybe more. Her belly was round and prominent under her dress. "This is Melissa," Pastor Mike said warmly. "She'll be assisting us today." Melissa smiled at me, and there was something in that smile that made my stomach clench. Not malicious, not mean, just knowing. "It's so wonderful to meet you," she said softly, reaching out to touch Emma's little hand. "She's absolutely beautiful." "Thank you," I managed to say, though my voice sounded strange in my own ears. I glanced at Daniel. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw tight, a muscle twitching in his cheek. He looked uncomfortable. No, more than uncomfortable. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. But I pushed the thought away. He was probably just nervous about the baptism, about holding Emma near water, about all these people watching us. That had to be it. Pastor Mike began speaking about the significance of baptism, about promises and community and faith. I tried to focus on his words, but my eyes kept drifting to Melissa. She was looking at Emma with such tenderness, such longing. And every few seconds, her eyes would flick to Daniel just for a moment before looking away again. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones, in my gut, the way you just know when something is off even if you can't explain why. "Now," Pastor Mike said, "if you'll hand Emma to Melissa, we'll proceed with the baptism." I hesitated for just a second before placing my daughter in this stranger's arms. Melissa took her so carefully, cradling her like she was made of glass. She stepped down into the baptismal pool, the water rising to her thighs, soaking the hem of her dress. Pastor Mike followed her into the pool. I stood there at the edge with Daniel, watching as this pregnant woman held my daughter in the water. The symbolism wasn't lost on me even then, even before I knew the truth. 2 babies, one in arms, one in the womb, both connected to my husband. Pastor Mike placed his hand gently on Emma's head. "Emma Grace Miller, I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." He cupped water in his hand and poured it over her forehead. Emma didn't cry. She just stared up at Melissa with those big blue eyes, completely trusting. And Melissa stared back at her with such pure love on her face that it actually took my breath away. Why would a stranger look at my daughter like that? They lifted Emma out of the water. Melissa carefully climbed out of the pool, water dripping from her dress, and handed Emma back to me. Our fingers brushed as I took my daughter. Melissa's hands were shaking. "Congratulations," she whispered, and her voice cracked slightly. "You have a beautiful family." The way she said family made it sound like a question, or maybe a wish. I clutched Emma to my chest as we walked back to our seats, my mind racing but not quite able to grasp what it was racing toward. After the service ended, everyone gathered in the fellowship hall for the reception. The room was decorated with soft pink and white balloons. The lavender cupcakes I'd ordered were displayed on a 3-tiered stand. Everything looked perfect, just like I'd planned. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. I kept seeing Melissa's face in my mind, the way she'd looked at Emma, the way she'd looked at Daniel, the way her hands had shaken. My mother appeared at my elbow, holding a plate of cupcakes. "That was beautiful, sweetheart. I cried through the whole thing." She paused, then lowered her voice slightly. Although I have to say, it was a bit unusual having that pregnant woman be the one to hold Emma. Seems like they'd want someone who could move more easily, you know. I forced a smile. "She's a volunteer from the church. Apparently she's very involved." My mother's eyes narrowed slightly. In that way mothers' eyes do when they sense something off. "How long has she been coming to this church?" 6 months, according to Pastor Mike's wife. 6 months. The same length as Melissa's pregnancy, probably, based on how far along she looked. My mother opened her mouth to say something else, but my sister Sarah rushed over, phone in hand. "Rebecca, the photographer wants to get some family shots by the baptismal pool before we cut the cake. Can you gather everyone?" For the next 20 minutes, I smiled for camera after camera. Family shots, shots with just Daniel and Emma, shots with my parents, shots with his parents, shots with the whole extended family. Through it all, I kept scanning the room for Melissa. I finally spotted her in a corner, talking quietly with Pastor Mike's wife, Lauren. She'd changed out of her wet dress into dry clothes, but she still looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight from foot to foot, one hand resting protectively on her pregnant belly. As if she could feel me watching, she looked up and our eyes met across the crowded room. She didn't look away, neither did I. We stared at each other for a long moment, and in that moment, I saw it. Guilt. She looked guilty, and sad, and sorry. Why would this stranger feel guilty about my daughter's baptism? Unless... No. I pushed the thought away before it could fully form. I was being paranoid, hormonal, still adjusting to motherhood and not sleeping enough. That's what I told myself. Daniel appeared next to me, making me jump. "You okay?" he asked. "You seem tense." "I'm fine," I lied, just overwhelmed by everything. He kissed my temple. It was perfect. Emma was perfect. You were perfect. He sounded sincere. He looked sincere. But when I glanced across the room again, Melissa was gone. The reception wound down around 1 in the afternoon. My family headed back to our house for a quieter celebration. Just close relatives, pizza, and more cupcakes. Emma was exhausted from all the excitement and fell asleep in my arms within minutes of getting home. I carried her upstairs to her nursery and laid her gently in her crib, watching her chest rise and fall with each tiny breath. She was so innocent, so pure, so unaware of the storm I could feel building on the horizon. I pulled out my phone and did something I can't fully explain, except that I was following an instinct I couldn't ignore. I opened Facebook and searched for Melissa's name. There were dozens of results, but I filtered by our city and started scrolling through profiles. It took me less than 5 minutes to find her. Melissa Chen, age 28, worked as a dental hygienist, originally from Sacramento. Her profile was semi-private, but I could see some of her posts. And there, from 4 months ago, was a pregnancy announcement. Blessed beyond measure. Baby arriving February 2024. Thank you, God, for this unexpected miracle. February. I did the math in my head, my hands starting to shake. If she was due in February, that meant she got pregnant in May. 6 months ago. 6 months ago, when Daniel had suddenly started working late 3 nights a week. When he'd joined a new gym across town instead of the one 5 minutes from our house. When he'd become distant and distracted, blaming it on stress at work. I'd been 7 months pregnant with Emma at the time, uncomfortable and exhausted, and I'd believed him when he said he just needed space to handle the pressure of becoming a father. No. This couldn't be what I was thinking. There had to be another explanation. I kept scrolling through Melissa's posts with trembling fingers. There, from 8 months ago. A photo of her at a coffee shop, smiling at the camera. And in the background, slightly blurred but unmistakable, was Daniel, my husband, sitting at a table in the background of this woman's photo, the same coffee shop where he'd claimed to be meeting clients for work. I zoomed in on the image. It was definitely him. Same haircut, same green jacket I'd bought him for Christmas. My vision started to blur, and I realized I was crying, silent tears streaming down my face. I scrolled further back. 7 months ago, Melissa had posted a photo at a hiking trail. Beautiful morning for a solo hike. Except it wasn't solo. In the comments, someone had asked who took the photo, and Melissa had replied with a smiley face emoji. No name, no explanation. But I knew who had taken that photo. Because Daniel had gone hiking that exact same morning, claiming he needed to clear his head before Emma arrived. The evidence was circumstantial, indirect, nothing concrete. But I knew. The way you know the sun will rise tomorrow. The way you know your own heartbeat. I knew. Melissa was 6 months pregnant, with my husband's baby, and she'd just held my daughter in a baptismal pool in front of our entire church community while I stood there completely oblivious. The betrayal was so enormous, so devastating, that for a moment I couldn't even process it. I just stood there in Emma's nursery, phone in my shaking hand, staring at photos of my husband's other life, while downstairs my family laughed and celebrated and had absolutely no idea that everything was burning down. I didn't confront Daniel that day. I knew better than that. I'd watched enough friends go through divorces to know that emotion couldn't drive this. I needed facts, evidence, a strategy. So I smiled through the rest of the afternoon. I cut the cake. I thanked everyone for coming. I hugged my mother goodbye and promised to call her tomorrow. And when everyone finally left and Emma was asleep and Daniel suggested we watch a movie together on the couch, I said yes. I sat next to him, his arm around my shoulders, pretending everything was normal, while inside I was screaming. Over the next 3 days, I became a detective. I checked Daniel's phone while he was in the shower. His text messages were clean, too clean, like they'd been recently deleted. But his call log showed repeated calls to a number not saved in his contacts. I called it from a burner phone I bought at Target. Melissa answered on the second ring. Hello? I hung up immediately, my heart racing. I checked our credit card statements. Coffee shops I'd never heard of. Restaurants in neighborhoods we never went to. A hotel charge from 6 months ago when he'd claimed to be at a work conference that I now couldn't find any record of. I logged into our bank account and discovered he'd opened a separate checking account I didn't know about. Small deposits, never more than a few $100s, probably to avoid triggering alerts. But it was enough to establish a pattern. Enough to prove this wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a relationship. A real relationship. He was building a life with her. While I was home pregnant with our daughter, he was falling in love with someone else, getting her pregnant, planning a future that didn't include me. On the 4th day after Emma's baptism, I was ready. I waited until Emma was napping. Then I called Daniel at work. Hey babe, he answered, sounding cheerful. What's up? Can you come home? I asked, keeping my voice steady. We need to talk about something. I could hear the immediate shift in his tone. Is Emma okay? Emma's fine. But I need you to come home. Now. Rebecca, I'm in the middle of something. Can it wait until tonight? No, it can't. Come home now, or I'm calling Melissa and having this conversation with both of you at the same time. Silence. The longest, loudest silence I've ever heard. Then quietly, I'll be there in 20 minutes. He walked through the door exactly 19 minutes later, his face pale, his hands shaking. I was sitting on the couch, phone in hand, 3 folders of printed evidence on the coffee table in front of me. Bank statements, credit card records, photos from Melissa's social media with Daniel in the background, screenshots of his call log. I'd prepared like I was going to trial. Daniel looked at the folders, and all the color drained from his face. Rebecca, I can explain. Sit down, I said calmly. Too calmly. He sat. How long? I asked. It's not what you think. How? Long. He closed his eyes. 8 months. 8 months. That meant he'd started seeing her when I was 5 months pregnant with Emma, when I was having morning sickness so bad I couldn't keep food down, when my back hurt and my feet were swollen and I was terrified about becoming a mother. He'd looked at me struggling and decided to find comfort somewhere else. "Is the baby yours?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He nodded, tears now streaming down his face. "Yes." "Did you plan for her to be at Emma's baptism?" "No. God, no. I had no idea she'd be there. When I saw her standing there by the pool, I almost died. I wanted to call the whole thing off, but I couldn't without explaining why. So that explained the panic I'd seen on his face. "Does she know about me?" I asked. "About Emma?" Daniel hesitated too long before answering. "She found out about you a few weeks ago," he finally admitted. "I'd told her I was single. When she got pregnant, she started asking more questions. She eventually figured out the truth. My God. This poor woman thought she was dating a single man, found out she was pregnant, then discovered her boyfriend was actually married with a newborn. And he'd let her hold Emma at the baptism, knowing it would destroy her. He'd destroyed both of us. "Get out," I said quietly. "Rebecca, please let me explain. I love you. I love Emma. Melissa was a mistake, but I can fix this. I'll end things with her. We can go to counseling. We can work through this." I stood up, walked to the front door, and opened it. "Get out of my house. You have 1 hour to pack a bag. After that, I'm calling a locksmith. You can't just kick me out. This is my house too." I held up my phone. "I can have my father and brother here in 15 minutes. They're going to be very interested to hear what you've been doing while I was pregnant with their granddaughter and niece. Do you really want to have that conversation right now?" Daniel grabbed his keys and walked out. He turned at the doorway, one last desperate attempt. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "You're sorry you got caught," I said. "There's a difference." I closed the door in his face. That night, after Emma was fed and sleeping peacefully in her crib, I sat at my kitchen table and made a decision. Daniel had made his choices in secret, had hidden and lied and deceived. I wasn't going to do the same. I opened my laptop and began writing an email to Pastor Mike, to our church community group leaders, to the friends who had celebrated with us just 4 days earlier. The subject line was "The truth about what happened at Emma's baptism." I didn't write it in anger. I didn't attack or accuse or rant. I just told the simple truth, that the man standing next to me during our daughter's baptism had been having an affair for 8 months. That the woman who held Emma in the baptismal pool was 6 months pregnant with his child. That he'd lied to both of us, manipulated both of us, betrayed both of us. I explained that I was sharing this not to humiliate anyone, but because our church community deserved to know the truth. Because Melissa deserved support, not judgment, as someone who'd been deceived. Because I needed my community to rally around Emma and me as we navigated this nightmare. I reread the email 3 times, making sure every word was measured and true. Then I hit send. Within an hour, my phone started ringing. First my mother, then my sister, then Sarah's husband, then my best friend from college, then Pastor Mike. The church community didn't react with gossip or scandal. They reacted with support. Pastor Mike called Daniel and asked him to take a voluntary leave from his volunteer positions at the church. Not as punishment, but as space for healing and accountability. The women's Bible study reached out to Melissa, not to shame her, but to offer support as a single mother who'd been lied to. My mother bought a plane ticket and moved into my guest room for 2 months. My sister organized a meal train so I didn't have to cook for 6 weeks. My father quietly found me the best divorce lawyer in the city. The community that had celebrated Emma's baptism now surrounded us with protection and love. But the most unexpected thing happened 3 weeks after everything exploded. Melissa reached out to me. She sent a Facebook message, short and tentative. "Rebecca, I'm so sorry. I never knew. If I'd known about you and Emma, I never would have been with him. I know you don't owe me anything, but if you're willing, I'd like to talk. Not to explain or excuse, just to apologize face to face. I understand if you don't want to." I stared at that message for 2 days before responding. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to categorize her as the enemy and move on. But another part of me, the part that had seen the guilt and pain on her face at the baptism, the part that recognized we were both victims of the same man, made me type back. Coffee shop on Main Street, tomorrow at 2. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, one hand protectively on her now very visible pregnant belly. She looked exhausted, scared, heartbroken. I sat down across from her. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Melissa started crying, quiet tears rolling down her face. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. If I'd known, I swear I never would have gone near him." "I know," I said, and I realized I meant it. He lied to both of us. When Pastor Mike's wife asked me to help with the baptism, I thought it was such an honor, a way to feel connected to the church community. Her voice broke. I didn't know that was your baby, your husband, your life that I was standing in." "How did you find out?" I asked. "About us?" Melissa took a shaky breath. "I got pregnant and started asking questions about his family, about whether his parents would be excited about being grandparents. He kept deflecting. Then I saw a notification pop up on his phone. Your name, with a heart emoji. I confronted him, and he finally admitted he was married, but said you were separated, and it was just a matter of time before the divorce was final." Of course he did. The oldest lie in the book. "When did you learn the whole truth?" I pressed. "The week before the baptism. I saw him with you and Emma at a grocery store. You were laughing, kissing, looking completely in love. That's when I knew everything he'd told me was a lie." "Why didn't you say something?" I asked. "Why did you still come to the baptism?" Melissa's tears fell faster now. "I almost didn't. I was going to cancel. But then I thought maybe this was God giving me a chance to see the truth with my own eyes, to understand what I'd been part of, even unknowingly. And when I held Emma, her voice broke completely. When I held her, I thought, this is my baby's half-sister. She's innocent in all of this. And so is the baby I'm carrying." We sat there crying together, 2 women destroyed by the same man, connected by children who would grow up as siblings even though their mothers had never meant to share anything. "What are you going to do?" I finally asked. "Have this baby, raise them alone." Daniel texted me last week, saying he wants to be there for the baby, but I told him I don't want his money or his presence. I'll figure it out on my own. I understood that instinct, the desire to cut out every trace of him. But I thought about Emma, about her innocent half-sibling who hadn't asked for any of this. "Can I give you some advice?" I asked carefully. Melissa nodded. "Don't make decisions about your baby's future based on your anger at Daniel. I'm furious too. But our kids didn't choose this. They deserve to know each other, if that's something you're open to someday. Not now, maybe not for years, but someday." Melissa looked at me with something like wonder. "How are you so gracious about this?" "I'm not gracious," I said honestly. "I'm heartbroken and furious, and I cry myself to sleep most nights. But I refuse to let Daniel's betrayal turn me into something I'm not. I refuse to let him take my faith, my kindness, my hope. Those are mine. He doesn't get to destroy those too." We talked for 2 more hours that afternoon. By the end, we weren't friends. We weren't allies, but we weren't enemies either. We were just 2 women trying to protect innocent children from the consequences of their father's selfishness. The divorce process took 8 months. Daniel fought for custody, which was almost funny considering he'd barely been present even when we were married. But my lawyer was exceptional, and the evidence was overwhelming. Texts, bank statements, witness testimony from Melissa herself. The judge granted me full physical custody, with Daniel receiving supervised visitation every other weekend. He was also ordered to pay child support, not just for Emma, but also for Melissa's baby once born. Turns out the state of California takes a very dim view of men who father multiple children while hiding one family from the other. Daniel tried to paint himself as a victim, as someone who'd made a mistake and deserved forgiveness. But the evidence told a different story. 8 months of deliberate deception, separate bank accounts, A whole secret life built on lies. The judge wasn't sympathetic. My church community continued to be incredible. They threw me a fresh start party when the divorce was finalized, complete with a cake that said, "Reclaimed" in beautiful script icing. Pastor Mike preached a sermon about redemption, about how our mistakes don't define us, but how we respond to them does. He didn't name names, but everyone knew, and the message was clear. Our community stood with truth and healing, not secrets and shame. Melissa gave birth to a baby boy in February, just like her due date predicted. She named him Isaiah. She sent me a photo, and he was beautiful. Dark hair like his mother, blue eyes like his father, innocent and perfect, and unaware of the complicated family he'd been born into. She included a note. "Thank you for your grace. I hope someday Emma and Isaiah can know each other. When the time is right. No pressure, just hope." I put the photo on my fridge. Not because I'd forgiven Daniel. I hadn't, and I might never fully. But because Emma had a brother. And someday, when she was old enough to understand, I wanted to be able to tell her that I chose love over bitterness. That I chose to see Isaiah as a blessing, not a reminder of pain. 18 months after that baptism, I was invited to speak at a women's conference at our church. The topic was betrayal and healing. I almost said no. The wound was still fresh, still tender, but something made me say yes. I stood in front of 200 women and told my story. The whole story. The baptism, the discovery, the confrontation, the choice to respond with truth instead of silence. And when I finished, something incredible happened. Dozens of women came forward, sharing their own stories of betrayal, husbands who'd cheated, business partners who'd stolen, friends who'd lied, family members who'd disappointed. We cried together, prayed together, held each other. And I realized that my pain had somehow created space for other people's healing. That the worst day of my life, that baptism where I discovered everything, had led to this moment where women felt safe enough to share their own worst days. Suffering is terrible. Betrayal is devastating. But it doesn't have to be wasted. It can become wisdom, connection, empathy. It can become strength. 2 years after that baptism, Emma was now 2.5 years old. She was thriving, happy, healthy, full of life and laughter. She loved music class at church. She loved reading books with my mother, who still visited every month. She loved her cousins and her friends and her little pink bicycle with training wheels. She had no memory of that baptism day, no awareness of the storm that had raged around her while she'd slept peacefully in her crib. And I was grateful for that. Childhood should be innocent. I'd started going back to school, finishing the nursing degree I'd put on hold when I got pregnant with Emma. It was hard, balancing single motherhood with classes and clinical rotations, but I was doing it. I'd even started dating again, cautiously, carefully, taking things slow. His name was Marcus, and he was a teacher at Emma's daycare. Kind, patient, genuine. He knew my whole story. I told him on our second date, laying it all out, giving him an easy exit if it was too much. He'd listened quietly, then said, "You survived something that would break most people, and you came out stronger and kinder. That's not baggage. That's character." I was falling for him, slowly but surely. One Saturday morning, I got a text from Melissa. We didn't talk often, maybe every few months, brief updates about the kids. But this message was different. Isaiah asked me yesterday if he has any brothers or sisters. I told him he has a sister named Emma. He asked if he could meet her someday. No pressure, but thought you should know. Whenever you're ready. If ever. I stared at that message for a long time. Emma was old enough now to start understanding family in a basic way. She knew she had a daddy she saw sometimes, grandparents, cousins. Was she ready to know she had a brother? Was I ready? I called my mother. "What do you think?" I asked after explaining the situation. She was quiet for a moment. "I think you'll know when the time is right. Trust your instincts, they haven't led you wrong yet." I thought about it for a week. Then I texted Melissa back. "How about the park? Next Saturday, noon. Just the kids, just us. No pressure. We can see how it goes. Saturday arrived bright and clear. I dressed Emma in her favorite yellow dress and explained as simply as I could that we were going to meet a little boy named Isaiah. "Is he my friend?" she asked, buckling into her car seat. "He's your brother," I said carefully. "You have the same daddy, but different mommies." Emma processed this with the easy acceptance of a toddler. "Okay, does he like swings?" "I don't know, baby. We'll find out." At the park, I spotted Melissa on a bench, a little boy with dark curls playing in the sandbox nearby. Isaiah was almost 2 now, chubby-cheeked and curious, digging in the sand with a bright red shovel. Emma saw him and immediately ran over. "Hi, I'm Emma. Want to build a castle?" Isaiah looked up, smiled, and handed her his shovel. Just like that, they were playing together, 2 innocent children who didn't understand the complexity of their connection. Melissa and I sat on the bench together, watching them. "Thank you for this," Melissa said quietly. "I know it's not easy." "It's not," I agreed. "But it's right. They're siblings. They deserve to know each other." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Emma and Isaiah laugh and play. "Can I tell you something?" Melissa asked after a while. "Of course." "That baptism, as horrible as it was for both of us, it saved me. If I hadn't been there, if I hadn't seen you with Daniel, if you hadn't found out and told the truth, I would have stayed in that relationship, would have believed his lies, would have let Isaiah grow up with a father who was living a double life." She turned to look at me. "You freed both of us, even though it cost you everything." I'd never thought about it that way. I'd always seen that baptism as the day everything fell apart. But maybe it was also the day everything came together. The day the truth finally emerged from the shadows. The day 2 families stopped living a lie. "We freed each other," I said, "by choosing honesty over shame." We stayed at the park for 2 hours. Emma and Isaiah played together beautifully, the easy friendship of young children unencumbered by adult complications. As we were leaving, Emma hugged Isaiah goodbye. "See you soon, brother," she said. Isaiah hugged her back. "Bye-bye, Emma." On the drive home, Emma was quiet, processing. Then she asked, "Mama, is it okay to love your brother even if he has a different mama?" I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "Yes, baby. It's more than okay. It's beautiful." 3 years after that baptism, I graduated from nursing school. My family filled the auditorium. My mother, my sister, my father, my brother, even Marcus, who'd proposed 6 months earlier. Emma sat in the front row with my mother, wearing a little dress she'd picked out herself, holding a handmade sign that said, "My mama is a nurse." As I walked across that stage to receive my diploma, I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The betrayal that had shattered my world. The choice to respond with truth instead of silence. The community that had surrounded me with love. The strength I didn't know I had until I had to use it. The healing that came not from forgetting, but from transforming pain into purpose. I thought about that baptism 3 years ago, when I'd stood in a church watching a pregnant stranger hold my daughter, completely unaware that my entire life was about to change. I used to think of that day as the worst day of my life, but now I saw it differently. That baptism was Emma's beginning, her entry into a community of faith and love. And in a strange way, it was mine too. Because on that day, I was baptized into a new life. A life of truth, of strength, of learning that I could survive anything. That betrayal didn't have to define me. That I could choose grace without becoming a doormat. That I could hold people accountable while still offering compassion. That I could be both fierce and kind. Emma still doesn't know the full story. She knows she has a brother named Isaiah, who she sees every few months at the park. She knows her daddy lives somewhere else and sees her sometimes. She knows she has 2 families that love her. Someday, when she's older, I'll tell her everything. I'll tell her about the baptism, about the discovery, about the choice I made to respond with truth and dignity. I'll tell her that difficult circumstances don't excuse bad choices. But I'll also tell her that people are complex, that her father's betrayal doesn't erase every good thing he ever did, That Melissa isn't a villain, just a woman who was lied to like I was. I'll tell her that family is complicated, but love doesn't have to be. That she can love her brother without betraying me. That she can feel angry about her father's choices without hating him. That forgiveness isn't about saying what happened was okay. It's about refusing to let it poison your future. I'll tell her that her baptism, the day that changed everything, was also the day that set us free. Free from lies, free from secrets, free from a life built on deception. And I'll tell her that watching her play with Isaiah at the park, watching two siblings love each other despite impossible circumstances, is one of the most beautiful things I've ever witnessed. Because if those two innocent children can choose love over division, then there's hope for all of us. Last week, Emma came home from preschool with a drawing. It was a picture of our family. She'd drawn herself in the middle, holding hands with me on one side and Marcus on the other. But she'd also drawn, off to the side, a little boy with dark hair. "That's Isaiah," she explained, pointing proudly. "My brother." I hung that drawing on the refrigerator, right next to the photo Melissa had sent me 3 years ago. Two children, connected by blood and circumstance and, most importantly, by love. Looking at that drawing, I realized something profound. We didn't just survive what happened at that baptism. We transformed it. We took betrayal and turned it into honesty. We took shame and turned it into strength. We took division and turned it into connection. And we did it not by pretending everything was fine, but by walking straight through the pain and coming out the other side. Some people say that baptism is about washing away sins. For Emma, that's exactly what it was. A beautiful ceremony, welcoming her into our faith community. But for me, that baptism was about something else entirely. It was about drowning my old life, the one built on lies I didn't know were being told. It was about emerging into a new life, one built on truth and strength and unshakable faith that I could survive anything. 3 years ago, I stood at a baptismal pool, watching my daughter being blessed, having no idea my world was about to shatter. Today, I stand in a life I rebuilt from those shattered pieces. A life that's not perfect, but it's real. A life that's not easy, but it's honest. A life where my daughter knows she's loved, her brother is welcomed, and truth always, always wins. That pregnant woman who held Emma in the pool that day, she helped me find the truth. And the truth, as painful as it was to discover, set all of us free. That's the real baptism. That's the real transformation. Not the water, not the ceremony, but the choice to emerge from betrayal as someone stronger, kinder, and more authentically yourself than you've ever been. And that, in the end, is the greatest victory of all.